reading will be from 2 Timothy chapter 2, verses 1 and 2, if you'd like to follow along. You then, my son, be strong in the grace that is Christ Jesus, and the things you have heard me say in the presence of many witnesses, entrust to reliable people who will also be qualified to teach others.
Good morning. Good morning. It is an honor to be here with you this morning, and the thoughts that I want to share with you, I'm hoping will be meaningful and encouraging, edifying, and true. That's kind of an important part. I hope you will forgive me for the remnants of the camp crud that I brought with me. I don't think I'm contagious. It's just the aftermath type stuff. But there's something magical that happens at camp. Everybody brings their cooties together, and we have quite a party. But anyway, I'll try to plow through, and if you can put up with me, I'll share some thoughts with you. Does the talent that someone has pass away with the talented? When they depart, and they're very talented, and the things that they have, their abilities, does it necessarily leave with them? I remember thinking this thought in a different context, but there was a pianist by the name of Arthur Rubinstein, and I remember thinking this thought when he passed. He was just like all the years he poured into learning how to play the piano. And I don't know if you ever heard him ever play or any recordings of it, but obviously very accomplished. And you think when they pass, it's gone. It's just all gone. You think about maybe a famous singer like Caruso or whatever, the time that's spent developing his voice so that he would be world renowned, and when he passes, it's done. It's gone. There's not even a little trace left of what his abilities were. You wonder what would it be like to be able to take? Maybe they're working on this right now, to take somebody's ability and download it. To save it for later. I'm afraid that they actually are trying to do that, but. The students of the talented can carry it on, can't they? The students of the talented one. If they are serious about it, that's kind of an important element. You can be a student of just about anything, but if you're not all that serious about it, you're probably not going to be much of a representation of your instructor. I remember I knew this guy who was a singer, and he was specifically he had an opera quality voice. And so he was a voice instructor, a voice teacher. Excuse me. And one of his students came to him on an occasion, and he said, I would do anything to be able to sing the way you sing. And his instructor said to him, no, you wouldn't. It's like, I just said I would. He says, no, you actually would not. He says, why are you telling me that I would not? He says, because I told you what to do to be able to sing like me. And you're not doing those things, so no, you would not do anything. And so I think sometimes we have to kind of take a step back and maybe examine ourselves in situations like that, and consider just how serious about things we are. I want to look briefly at Joshua chapter 24. You can go there. It's just a quick verse to read here. I'm going to spend a couple of verses, a little bit here in this part of the scriptures. But ultimately, we'll be ending up in Hebrews 11 and 12. The teacher in the class this morning got into my notes a little bit. But that's okay, isn't it? This is Joshua chapter 24. Just a brief description of what was the condition after the Israelites had gone in and occupied the land of Canaan. It was quite the ordeal, wasn't it, getting to this point. And we see all the ups and downs the Israelites had, and the very serious price that was paid by those who were, who because of their unbelief, their bodies are still lying out there in the wilderness. It comes to verse 31, and it says, "And Israel served the Lord all the days of Joshua, and all the days of the elders who survived Joshua, and had known all the deeds of the Lord which he had done for Israel." Sounds like a pretty good condition that things were in. They finally plowed through all those difficulties, overcame their doubts. The people who were resistant and rebellious were done away with. And here now Joshua has led them into the land. This took several years for them to occupy the land, but ultimately he is showing and teaching and demonstrating what being dedicated to God looks like. This is what it looks like. And it sounds like the people that surrounded Joshua, the elders, whether they were influenced by Joshua or vice versa, or kind of a team effort, they were a benefit to one another in exhibiting what they should have in order to be pleasing to God. They went through a lot to get here. You probably ought to show some gratitude by how you behave yourself. And so they're acting in this way. They had established God in their hearts. He was established in their hearts. They were established, and they had established a reputation in the surrounding nations as being the people of God. So it was a very strong influence that was being demonstrated here. And because of these things, they inherited the promises that were given to their forefathers. So a lot of good things had come together at this point as we read this part of the history of the nation of Israel. So the question might be this: how could their children have best served and honored their efforts? Because one thing we do know, Joshua and those elders passed away, right? All of the abilities, the things they accomplished, their talents, the things that they represented, one of these days, that person's going to breathe their last. So how could the children best serve and honor all of those efforts that they had made? Well, they could hold an annual commemoration, right? Pick a day out of the year and say, every year we're going to remember how good these guys were. And just maybe have some banners and a parade and all this hoo-ha going on about how wonderful they were. Or they could erect a monument in the name of Joshua and any of the others that they would want to name specifically, and have some kind of a representation of them there so that people can ask about them and say, they were really a good person. How about, and this is what I'm suggesting, how about continuing in the serious obedience? Wasn't that the best way for them to honor what had come before them? Is to continue in the obedience that they observed in those people that they admired so much. Not long after this, Judges chapter 2, we see kind of a change in the atmosphere. Judges chapter 2, we see what subsequent generations did do and how it's described here. If they had read a book on how to dismantle the efforts that had gone before you, this would be how to do that. Or another book on how to dishonor the efforts that were made, that you observed and saw were right, but decided, yeah, that's just not for me. It says this, chapter 2, verses 10 and 11. I'm going to read verse 11 first, kind of back up and kind of give some context with verse 10. It says, "Then the sons of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord and served the Baals." Doesn't sound to me like they were continuing the effort. Doesn't sound to me like they were impressed enough to stay the course with what had gone before them. And what does it say in verse 10 then as we back up? "And all that generation also were gathered to their fathers, and there arose another generation after them," he's referring to Joshua and the elders, "a generation after them who did not know the Lord, nor yet nor yet the work which he had done for Israel." They didn't know the Lord. Why? What happened? There's this disconnect, this separation. Everything was going so well. They occupied the land of Canaan. They set everything in motion as far as the way God would have it to look and to be. And something changed. Something went awry. There's probably some speculations that we could make, and I would just have you read this on your own time. Deuteronomy 6, starting with verse 1, I think through verse 9. And it talks about the importance of knowing who the Lord God is, but also teaching it to your children when you lie down and when you rise up. And as you're walking along the way, and that you write it on the doorpost of your house and have it to be frontals on your forehead. It actually says it means to have it right between your eyes. I mean, how much more in front of you can it be than to have it that prominent and before you? And the point of the message from Deuteronomy is they need to get it. You fathers, you need to get it. You need to be walking in obedience, but they're not going to get it by osmosis. They're not going to get some kind of just because they happen to be in the same room with you, that they're going to start behaving like you. You need to teach it to them all of the time. And you need to live it all of the time if you want this to continue on and to be a true honor to the efforts that were made probably ahead of you. So if you want to go on from here then over to Hebrews chapter 11. Hebrews 11. We'll read the same verses that we heard in the class this morning. It says a refresher to the message that we have here. Remember, what's being discussed here is these people are being highlighted as objects of faith or noteworthy people of faith. And the point of the Hebrew writer was not just so that we would admire these people. That wasn't yes, they are worthy of admiration for what they did. But that was not the end of it for him. The reason the Hebrew writer told us about them is to let you know that you walk with them. You are among them. You too are people of faith. And so we need to have that association with them in order for these words to have any meaning at all. Excuse me. Hebrews chapter 11, verses 13 through 16 says, all these died in faith without receiving the promises, but having seen them and having welcomed them from a distance, and having confessed that they were strangers and exiles on the earth. For those who say such things make it clear that they are seeking a country of their own. And indeed, if they had been thinking of that country from which they went out, they would have had opportunity to return. But as it is, they desire a better country. That is, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. Let's think about the nature of their faith. Their faith wasn't just for themselves. They weren't just looking at themselves and like, what am I doing? Am I doing good? And so forth. They were looking forward to something. They were looking forward to those who would come after them. And they understood that it was important for them to walk in this way so that they would be able to hand this down in an effective manner. They wanted this, what we read about them, they wanted it to live on through you and me. They wanted it to live and live and live down through the generations. Skip over to verse 32 from there. Let's look at the people that are named here and the things that they did and how the Hebrew writer shows them here. And the whole idea was to live in such a way as to not just make it through their own lives, but that this will be handed down. Have that in your mind as we go here. And what more shall I say, for time will fail me, if I tell of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, of David and Samuel and the prophets, who by faith conquered kingdoms, performed acts of righteousness, obtained promises, shut the mouths of lions, quenched the power of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, from weakness were made strong, became mighty in war, put foreign armies to flight. Women received back their dead by resurrection, and others were tortured, not accepting their release, in order that they might obtain a better resurrection. And others experienced mockings and scourgings, yes, also chains and imprisonment. They were stoned, they were sawn in two, they were tempted. They were put to death with the sword. They went about in sheepskins and goatskins, being destitute, afflicted, and ill-treated, men of whom the world was not worthy, wandering in deserts and mountains and caves and holes in the ground. And all these, having gained approval through their faith, did not receive what was promised. Because God had provided something better for us, so that apart from us, they should not be made perfect. Do you see how we are linked together with them? We are tied together with them. What they did before needs to have an impact on us in the shaping of our lives. I don't know if you've ever participated when you were in school, maybe some of you are still in school, participate in track and field. I did that in high school, junior high actually. And one of the things I participated in was the relay race. Anybody ever do the relay race? You know, there's some technique involved there, isn't there? There's this team effort thing has to happen, doesn't it? You kind of have to get together and decide who should start and who should finish, right? You kind of map that whole thing out. See who's better where. So when you're running a relay race, how do you make the fast runner who just ran before you worth your while? How do you, okay, you got the runner coming, okay, you're waiting for them to hand you the baton. And they're running it for all they're worth, okay? How do you make that worthwhile? By taking the baton and putting your all into it. Because they just put you ahead of everybody, okay? When you're getting the baton, you're just like this much ahead of everybody else. And so you're going to say, oh, I can't lose that. If anything, I need to grow that a little bit. Maybe do a little bit better than the one who just handed me the baton. Or how do you make things worthwhile for the next runner? It's the same answer, isn't it? Make their efforts count, the ones who handed it to you. Make your efforts count for the sake of the person who's following you. You run with all your might. Hebrews 12, verses 1 through 3 says this. Therefore, remember what we just read about that they would not be perfected without us? Therefore is referring back to that. Since we have so great a cloud of witnesses surrounding us, let us also lay aside every encumbrance and the sin which so easily entangles us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. For consider him who has endured such hostility by sinners against himself, so that you may not grow weary and lose heart. We borrow from the energy that was brought to us. We think about how, perhaps you might think of it in terms of, I may get ahead of myself in my notes a little bit, that we may be warming our hands by fires that we didn't build. And so our appreciation is to keep the fire going. That's the real demonstration of that appreciation. We strive with and for each other. We are to strive for those who will come after us. Isn't that the ideal? Do we just live in this moment and then whatever happens next, well, they're on their own? Not exactly how that's supposed to go, is it? Hopefully we're thinking about staying strong while we're together in this setting right here. But there's a next generation, isn't there? Supposed to be. What's that going to look like? Well, it kind of depends on what this looks like and how much what we do here is taught to them when they come along. If we remain dedicated to the efforts of if we remain dedicated, the efforts of those before you do live on. Remember I talked about those famous people before? If someone learns how to play the piano, for example, as well as Arthur Rubinstein did, all the techniques and so forth, doesn't Arthur Rubinstein live on in a manner of speaking? And if my dedication in my walk with the Lord is something that I teach and influence other people to do, and I go on to my reward, but they are emulating, just like Paul said, follow me as I follow Christ. We follow one another. We are an example to one another. Doesn't that continue to live? We think, well, they're gone now. No, not necessarily. If those whom we touch remain dedicated, the efforts you make will live on. Just like one of these days I'm going to step off of this earth. I don't know. I hope I'm leaving it in good hands. You can know whether that's true to the best of your ability. We are like links in a chain. We are connected to the efforts others have made. As I mentioned, the idea of people put it, well, we're standing on other people's shoulders, warming our hands by fires we didn't build. There's a lot of different analogies you could make there, but it helps you to appreciate what you have and to demonstrate that appreciation by what you continue to do. Luke chapter 14, I'm not going to read this entire parable. I'm just going to cite an attitude here in a parable. Luke chapter 14, I'm going to read, like I said, just a portion of this parable to answer this question. I mentioned it's like a chain. What can break the chain? What breaks the chain? The chain can be broken. The chain, sadly, in many places and times in people's lives, has been broken. As we read in the book of Judges, the chain got broken, and they spent a lot of years trying to fix that chain. In Luke chapter 14, starting in verse 16, see if this doesn't sound familiar as to what can disrupt and affect whether or not people continue on. But he said to him, a certain man was giving a big dinner, and he invited many. And at the dinner hour, he sent his slaves to say to those who had been invited, come, for everything is ready now. But they all alike began to make excuses. There it is. Excuses. The first one said to him, I have bought a piece of land. I need to go out and look at it. Please consider me excused. Another said, I have bought 5 yoke of oxen. I am going to try them out. Please consider me excused. And another one said, I have married a wife, and for that reason I cannot come. Lots of things can break the chain. The cares and concerns of this world become more important than whether or not we are giving our attention to what really does matter, what is eternal. We have to have some very serious honesty with ourselves when it comes to that, and ask ourselves, okay, I know that I should be doing more. I know they've asked me to do more. I've tried to do more, and I think I could do more. But if you're like me, I have a tendency to let myself off the hook. If I don't have somebody coming down on me, pressing down on me, saying, tapping me on the shoulder, no, you need to get busy. Sometimes I kind of go a little slack in my effort. That's what the most ideally should be, when we kind of snap out of it and get back on track with trying to make sure that we're serious about what we do. We just read in Hebrews 12:1 these words. It says that we are admonished to throw off that which so easily encumbers us. Think about trying to run that relay race with leg weights on. Why would you do that? The leg weights have their role, though they have a purpose, but not during the race, not during the race. We train, we get stronger in a lot of different ways. But what he's saying here is the reason why you're not doing it better is because you have this weight that you're carrying around with you. Throw it off. The cares of this world are preventing you from being the best you can be, honoring those who came before you, and being prepared to be honorable, not for yourself, but for God's sake, to those who follow. Throw those things off. Can we hope to continue the effectiveness of those who were before us if we are anything less than serious? Can we even hope it? Can we hope to have the spirit of diligence live in those who come after us if we are something less than serious? We have to take it seriously. We have to sober up a little bit and make sure that we are dedicated, that God would have us to be dedicated every single day. Can we hope to please God if we are anything less than serious about our devotion to Him? Well, these are my closing remarks. For the sake of those who come next, get serious. And for the sake of what comes next after this life, we had all better get very serious. I hope you'll consider these thoughts as we stand together and sing a song of encouragement.